and helpless. We have watched too many of our comrades fade away and disappear, slipping through the cracks and out of reach of possible intervention. To do nothing to address and mitigate these failures is at best irresponsible and at worst an acceptance that we are complicit in our firefighters' suffering, often needlessly. We can't save everyone, and we can't force our firefighters to talk about their feelings or to seek help. What we can do, though, is ensure that all serving firefighters are at least given the platform, the means, and the opportunity to talk, to offload, and ultimately to acknowledge when they're not okay. The things we see and the things we have to do at the incidents we attend can take their toll on our mental health and our emotional well-being, and we must do more. Under a month ago, one of our firefighters, one of our pals, took her own life. We have a duty and a moral obligation to do what we can to prevent others from doing the same. Congress, support the composite, and again this morning, I ask you for your help to look after your firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Claire Craig from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. Again, supporting the motion. I'm really thoughtful hearing the last few speakers and thinking about it, and there's a couple of points I want to specifically raise. I'm a mental health physio. I've worked in mental health for over 16 years. I am a suicide trainer for Astel Save a Life. I support the TURAS resources. In the last year, our Health and Care Professions Council have changed our standards of practice for practicing AHPs. One of the things that's on that now is that you have to take, it's about you have to take responsibility for recognising your deterioration in your health and before you go off work and staying in work. So it's not just about doing something later and doing something once the horse has bolted and once you're ill, it's about the pre. And sometimes that's about you recognising it in yourself and us helping each other to recognise those signs and symptoms that might be deteriorating. But the other side of that is about how we support our colleagues and recognise the change in our colleagues. The training that I've done over the years, the problem is particularly working in healthcare, you're often thinking about your patients. But how many times have you brought it up with a colleague? I've asked members of my team, are you feeling suicidal? The answer has been yes. I've asked them and had that conversation to take it further and to actually support them to get help. And that's where we need to do. So it's not just about the information, it's about how we actually put it into practice. So again, let's think about action at the same time as training. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. I see no further speakers on this, so we'll move to the vote. Composite O, Wellbeing and Mental Health in the Workplace. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Can I see all those against? And can I see any abstentions? I think that's unanimous. Thank you. I now call amended motion number 81, CCTV recording of professional drivers, to be moved by the United Road Transport Union.
Chair, Congress, Peter McKevitt, United Road Transport Union, moving motion 81, CCTV recording of professional drivers. First time speaker. Thank you. The use and implementation of CCTV equipment in the workplace is very common nowadays. Employers in our industry are now installing driver-facing cameras that operate 24/7, even when the driver is at rest. Now, our union fully supports the placement of outward-facing traffic cameras and any genuine health and safety initiatives that keep our colleagues and the public safe. But these new driver-facing cameras are open to abuse and exploitation. These cameras are fitted under the guise of safety, but instead are being abused by the employers as part of their disciplinary proceedings. I'll give you one example. I recently attended a disciplinary for one of my members, and the allegation from his employer was lack of concentration while driving a HGV. Their evidence: they looked through the camera footage and counted how many times he yawned. Yeah, and that's despite planning his work days to 12 to 15 hours a day. There wasn't an accident, there was no incident of note. They just said he looks too tired to drive and therefore he must be unsafe. You were glad to hear there was no further action. Despite using the cameras this way, the company was still GDPR compliant in regards to CCTV footage they used as part of their investigation. The haulage industry is difficult enough, And it's worth mentioning that we still have a shortage of drivers right across the country. The number of HGV drivers in the UK has dropped by 53,000 in the last 4 years. The transport of goods by roads is an essential part of our society, and the decline in drivers has been ongoing since before the pandemic and Brexit. A more worrying statistic is that only 2% of HGV drivers are under the age of 25. The average age of HGV drivers is 55, and only 1% of HGV drivers are women. In an industry that is already struggling to attract the next generation of professional drivers, the use and abuse of this technology is just one more reason not to become a driver. There are too many unscrupulous HGV operators that use this technology as a constant 24/7 spy in the cab. We also recognise that this technology and the constant monitoring of workers is also prevalent in many other industries, including the telecom sector. We call on the General Council to lobby the UK government to introduce new legislation that recognises a fundamental breach of privacy laws under an individual human rights. We seek to outlaw the practice of utilising such intrusive CCTV evidence in an employer's workplace disciplinary proceedings within Scotland. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Delegate. Communication Workers Union, a second.
Chair, Congress, Craig Anderson, to second motion 81. Specifically, the CWU, at the time of the cut-off for amendments, we submitted the amendment regarding this current situation that was going on within one of our employers. But we fully agree with the United Road Transport Union that this is a violation of individuals' personal human right to privacy. CWU's largest recognised telecom employer started installing new cameras in all their vehicles this year. But Congress, I believe this is a historic moment for the CWU and for the trade union movement. Our campaign was launched, Rights Camera Action, on the 26th of February at 2:30 p.m. Members engaged, social media posts, the company was informed we were taking them on. The company responded, as they always do, again on the 26th of February at 8:20 p.m, 5 hours and 50 minutes from when we started our campaign, with the words, "We have no intention of using cameras in vans." Congress, this invasion of privacy is a legitimate concern across many industries, and it's especially a concern for female workers. Companies are actually crossed the line. So Congress, let's be clear, we are not having this. Let's name and shame these employers. Let's take them on. Let's make these employers not worth being companies to work for. And also, when they supply company vehicles and offer people the use of it privately, do as we are telling our members to do. Tell them to stick their company vehicle. Cheers.
Thank you, Delegate. I see no further speakers, so we'll move to the vote. Motion 81, CCTV recording of professional drivers. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to motion 83, Campaign for Climate Hazards Health and Safety Training, to be moved by Aberdeen Trade Union Council.
Thanks, President. Good morning, Congress. Kate Ramsden, Aberdeen TUC, moving motion 83. Yesterday we supported Comp B on just transition with its range of actions to address climate change and promote a green industrial strategy. We believe that this motion complements that composite by looking specifically at the workplace and how best to protect and promote workers' rights in the face of climate change from a health and safety perspective, especially in terms of excessive heat. It recognises, as do we all, the changes to our climate in Scotland, which reflect similar changes across the world, something that this Congress has already agreed needs addressed as a matter of urgency. It's hard to remember now, but last summer in Scotland was the 5th hottest since records began, with June the hottest on record. Some parts of Scotland saw the mean temperature 2.5 degrees centigrade higher than average, with a wildfire in the Highlands, one of the biggest the UK has ever seen. Since then, even through the winter, every month's temperature has been warmer than in previous years. All this affects our members at their work, sweltering under temperatures above 40 degrees centigrade in work vehicles and buildings, well in excess of what we've normally been used to. Then come the severe storms, flooding, road and rail, leading to disasters like the Stonehaven train derailment in 2021 and the loss of workers' lives. As a country, we need employers to adapt to climate change and to severe and unaccustomed weather events in order to keep the public safe and our members safe at their work. There's a critical need for mandatory climate hazard workplace risk assessments and annual reporting across all employers as part of the Fair Work Agreement with the Scottish Government. Our motion calls for a campaign for a specific maximum working temperature law, including the ability to withdraw labour if workplace temperatures surpass 30 degrees centigrade or 27 degrees centigrade if our members are doing strenuous work in PPE, because we have to recognise that workplaces and work practices in this country are not currently geared up to such temperatures, even though they're now a regular feature of our summers. We must work across the trade union movement to identify changing and growing climate health and safety hazards and to campaign to make sure employers are including these hazards in workplace risk assessments and annual reports. Unions and trade union councils, all of us, are in a great position to engage with our members and public and private sector employers to negotiate and campaign for workplace-based climate hazard risk assessments. We need amendments to health and safety legislation to support the mandatory use of these risk assessments. Finally, the motion asks the General Council to build on the excellent Adaptation Scotland climate hazards resilience in the workplace resource and make sure this remains fit for purpose and our activists are trained in it. These measures are essential to protect workers' rights, so please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Again, dead on your time. Thank you. Seconder, please.
President Congress, Stuart Graham, Unison Scotland, seconding motion 83, climate hazards. So yeah, as a previous speaker had referred to, there's a climate hazards toolkit and resource that was developed with Adaptation Scotland in conjunction with Unison Scotland last year, and we took it into branches to trial. So from a kind of small perspective, again, Glasgow City Unison is an employer, employs an admin resource of 5 workers and a local organiser. So we applied that to our branch, almost like from a private perspective. And Aberdeen Unison had taken it into local government to try and talk to the employer around that. I suppose it focuses on the issues the workforce will have to navigate and actually get into their work when extreme weather events take place. Now, I appreciate that there's reference to maximum temperatures in there, but particularly whenever we're looking at the scenario in Glasgow, it's mostly storms, flooding and snow and ice that's disrupting transport routes and public transport. This climate hazards tool takes a different approach and looks at the workers that are actually having to get to their work, and particularly if we're looking at the council aspect around this, the public sector duty to clear roads, to lift bins and waste, to care for the elderly, to care for vulnerable children. It reduces the scope of these workers to get to work. The tool's not jargon based, it's really easy to read, it's really easy to apply, and you can use the health and safety scoring matrix to accompany it, so it's not going to, I suppose, introduce a different type of calculation around this. And I think particularly, again within the public sector, when we've only got carbon impact assessments which are looking at the emissions that public sector organisations are emitting, they're really difficult to actually understand. So this, once again, is not seeking to replace that, but it's another way of holistically measuring the overall climate risk to the workforce. So please support this and develop the tool. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Delegate. Dead on 2 minutes. I see no further speakers, so we will move to the vote on motion 83. Campaign for Climate Hazard Health and Safety Training. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? That looks unanimous. Thank you, delegates. Now move on to motion 84, mobilising and supporting hospitality workers, to be moved by the annual STUC Youth Conference.
President, Congress, Colmcille, STUC Youth Committee, moving motion 84. The gig economy model is creeping into all aspects of society. Capitalism in Britain increasingly depends on precarious, casualised and non-unionised labour. Young people in particular are overwhelmingly employed in insecure work, with those under 18 often working for just over £5 an hour in one of the world's wealthiest nations. Workers aged 16 to 24 are 5.5 times more likely to be on 0 hours contracts than older workers, and 75% of those young workers are unprotected against unfair dismissal, all while more than half of workers in the gig economy earn less than the minimum wage. Uber's CEO recently said the quiet part out loud regarding the gig economy, admitting that his company changes its drivers' pay based on their, quote, behavioural patterns. In Glasgow, hospitality and service industry workers are the fastest growing part of the workforce. The consequence is an economy that is increasingly dislocated and workers who are ever more alienated. This situation was encapsulated last month by Brewdog when they opted to scrap the real living wage for bar workers during the most acute cost of living crisis in a generation. Comrades, this is what our movement is up against, and it's the focus of this motion to support and organise hospitality workers. A rodent infestation, a leaking washing machine, chipping knives, warm fridges and unstable deep fryers. Those are just some of the health and safety issues staff at Glasgow's 13th Note had been dealing with in the 6 months before their historic strike action last year. In the hospitality industry, these conditions are not new, they are endemic. What was new, however, was the fully unionised team and the historic vote for strike action in Glasgow. Unite Hospitality's fight and others led by the STUC's Better Than Zero campaign prove that workers can organise against the worst conditions in the most casualised industries. Only yesterday, workers at 13th Note won their employment tribunal against the owner. Won their employment tribunal against the owner of the bar who had made them all redundant last year. The judge held that the owner failed to consult with workers at all, awarding maximum compensation to all claimants. Building on these campaigns and the struggle led at the 13th Note, this motion reaffirms just how important it is that our movement keeps pace with the pernicious nature of British capital, tackling insecure work wherever we can. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Delegate. Have a seconder, please.
Drew Gilchrist, North Lanarkshire Trades Council. Outside of my Trades Council work, I'm also the chair of Unite's National Young Members Committee, so I've had the pleasure of supporting the 13th Note workers, Nick Troy especially, and the officers and organisers that led that campaign. What we need to realise as a conference, as a movement, is we've talked about a lot this week, the deindustrialisation of our country has led to a loss in jobs for young members. Specifically, they're moving into unfair hospitality work, low pay, 0 hour contracts. The movement must realise that as young members are moving into this sector, the way in which we organise them has to change. I move that you support the motion.
Thank you, Delegate. I see no further speakers, so motion 84, mobilising and supporting hospitality workers. We move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Can I see all those against? And any abstentions? I think that's unanimous. I now invite Ros Foyer, STUC General Secretary.